Hello, everyone. I'm going to talk about an important topic for product managers. It's building with empathy. I'm Prachi Agarwal. A little bit about my background. My education is in biomedical engineering. I have a graduate degree from University of Wisconsin-Madison. I also got certification in strategic management from the school. That's how I transitioned into program management for a B2B company in Chicago called CCC Information Services. They make software for automotive insurance companies such as State Farm, Geico, etc. Then actually I moved into the B2C world for a company called Realtor.com in Bay Area, where I was responsible for the entire search and listings experience for the web product. It's anytime a user comes in to search for homes in San Jose, how the list view looks like, the map view looks like, how the filter experience is going to be, how the pictures are going to be laid out, how we're going to make revenue from the page. All of it was under my charter and was such a great experience. Then I actually took a year off to travel around the world with my husband. It was a really exciting time. I also tried to start up in between around travel. That calls for a story for another day. But yeah, now I'm in Google, product manager for trust and safety. Extremely passionate about this area because I think the work that I'm doing is quite fulfilling. Okay, so I think the main goal or the takeaway from today's session is going to be that a product manager needs to have empathy in order to build great products. The way I'm going to convince you is I'll talk about what is empathy towards your users and giving you tools on how you can build that, empathy towards your team, empathy towards yourself, and then looking out for some common pitfalls. So, what is empathy? Empathy is actually feeling what someone else is feeling. And it's more complex than it sounds because you have to relate to people that are very different from you, who come from different circumstances, different backgrounds. So to make it slightly better for you, a more objective way of defining empathy is there are these 4 attributes that have been defined by a nursing scholar called Theresa Weisman that I feel can be very useful to sort of build empathy over time, building it as a muscle in a way. So the 4 attributes to the empathy, the first one is perspective taking, being able to step in someone else's shoe and understanding what is their truth. Second, being non-judgmental, which can be sometimes very hard for humans like us to do. Third is actually recognizing emotions. Like, what is it that the person is feeling and why is that person feeling that? Lastly, it's being able to communicate with that person. So hardly any empathetic conversations, at least. Empathetic conversations are like, I know what you're feeling, I've been there. Or it's more of, I don't know what to say, but I'm so glad you shared this with me. There is this very impactful video by Brené Brown on YouTube. I have a link at the end, you should check it out. That really makes you understand empathy deeply. Okay, so why is empathy even important for product managers? Our system one side of the brain is the emotions. They are making most of the decisions on a day-to-day basis. So when your end users or your customers are using your product, they are making different decisions on the product. So if you don't really understand the emotions of your users, how do you build around that? Second thing I wanted to talk about is, there are a lot of research out there that says like a feeling-based approach to building products versus an objective-based approach leads to more creative and innovative solutions. And in tech, we all know innovation is so important. Lastly, I think when you're doing product discovery, qualitative analysis can be extremely powerful because those aha moments don't come from data, but they come from these qualitative analysis or qualitative research that you need to know about. So today we are going to focus on 3 types of empathy. Empathy towards the users, which is where we're going to spend most of our time, empathy towards the team, and empathy towards ourselves. So empathy towards end user. So I think empathy towards end users can be built. Again, I think it's a skill that you can build over time. And you start as a product manager with user research. There are a lot of tools that I'm just going to walk you through in the next slide. Second, when you are actually doing a lot of this user research, building empathy, you will involve your team as well in this process. And when the team is able to have empathy towards the end user, they're intrinsically motivated to build the best experience for the end users. You end up building a team of missionaries. And as a PM, we have to keep asking ourselves, when was the last time we spoke to the customer? Because if it's been over a few weeks, then it's been too late. So, as I mentioned, user research can help build empathy. You have to start somewhere. So, the first place where you start building empathy is having one on one conversations with your end user customers. Having one-on-one conversations, how you structure that and frame that depends on whether you're able to build empathy or not. So firstly, you have to make sure that you make your customers feel very comfortable when you're having these discussions with them. Always have a structured list of questions, but make sure these questions are open-ended and bias-free. One thing that we learned, I went through this design thinking course in Stanford, and they made us use this five whys. So anytime we ask a question to the consumer, you have to keep asking why 5 times to really understand why the user makes a certain decision. Like, what are their triggers? What are their emotions? So that don't forget the power of why when you're asking users these questions. And then don't be afraid to have these conversations in non-traditional settings. There was back in my days at Realtor.com, when we were prototyping for particular going through the ideation phase, when we actually had some designs ready, me and my designer, we just went to Whole Foods, bought a bunch of $10 gift cards, and with those designs we tried to just stop people and ask them for the feedback. The feedback that we got at that time in non-traditional setting, non-organized, was quite authentic, which was a very different experience. So don't be afraid to just go out and ask people about their thoughts. So next tool that you can use as a PM is try to organize focus group discussions. Generally, you need somebody like moderator to help you with it, or somebody, if you have a user research team in your company, to help you with that. The focus group discussions can be really helpful when you're trying to gather, you're trying to understand users who come from different backgrounds, or from different circumstances, and you get them together in a room. You can get a lot of insights from these discussions. The other important way you could do user research, which I think is probably one of the best ways, is to actually observe the user on the job. Like, whatever job they're trying to do for which your product is being built, try to observe them doing that. One of the really memorable user research that I used to do back again at my time at Realtor was I would shadow these home buyers when they were going for open houses. Like, I would drive with them, and it was very. So I'll give you an example. One insight that came by just driving with them to open houses is we noticed that a lot of these home buyers were spending time outside their home, and they were looking around to see, is this neighborhood going to be safe for my family? Will I be able to make friends in this neighborhood? Like, different questions around just the neighborhood would go on in their mind. And like a feature that we did to sort of address that is we brought in the street view from Google front and center into the gallery view. When they're looking at the home, the pictures of the home, they want to see neighborhoods. How do you bring that experience virtually? It was very interesting. Another thing, like, if you're building, let's say, internal tools for your customers, where you have the opportunity to hear your customers on the job, you should do that. Like I've done in Google, for example, I tend to do shadow sessions where if I'm building a product for somebody, I'm able to just listen in, try to understand what steps they're taking to get the job done, or how their emotions are weighing through that job. And then you can actually, if you have built like a web tool or something, you should see how your users are using that tool. So there are tools like Hotjar that can help you do that. And it's such a humbling experience, because you as a product manager, you are designing the feature, so you think it's very easy to understand certain call to action or the helper text. But when you actually see user trying to find simple things, it can be very humbling for you, and it makes you think when you're trying to design these features. And of course, lastly, in this vertical is going to be just being able to read customer feedback. This is how I actually started. This is how my journey started for building empathy. Was I would spend every day 30 minutes just reading through customer feedback reports. Like you could do that through Qualtrics report if that's the way your company collects surveys, or if you're selling a product online, try to go through online reviews, and that also really helps you start your journey on building empathy. Lastly, when you have all of these conversations and different discussions with your customers, I think you should consider building a journey map. A journey map can be very important overall, not just for yourself, but also for the people in your company. It sort of puts the end user to life, and helps your leaders or your stakeholders or your team to actually build empathy with the users as well. So something I encourage you to do if you haven't looked at it yet. Okay, so now that we talked about building empathy, let's talk about how we can actually implement them in real life. So the way, I think there are two ways to think about how you can build features to help your users during these emotional situations. First example I want to talk about is we in design thinking, we talk about building for the extreme user or extreme use cases. How about building for stressful use cases? That is, how can your product help the user when they're stressed out? So as an example, on the left side is how Realtor.com looked in 2017 versus basically this was after we'd done a bunch of changes in the product. So the users, so through the different user empathy, the journey that we had, we realized that people, when they are actually trying to buy homes in competitive market like Bay Area, for example, they really cared on when the house came in the market. And they had this FOMO that, oh my God, I'm going to miss out on this home because I don't know when this home came into the market, and there's going to be somebody would quickly place an offer on it. So we sort of try to alleviate that pain by telling exactly when the house came into the market. You can see that on the right hand screen above the picture, new 20 hours ago or 9 hours ago. So the user knows actually, okay, this is when the house came into the market, right on the search results itself. Another stressful situation that we've designed for is users were of the mindset. There's certain when you're designing a product, you will have users coming in from different backgrounds, right? So we had users from different financial backgrounds. So one of a user set that we were thinking about is there are users who think not really, oh, what's the cost of the house? It's like, what's going to be my monthly bill because I'm living paycheck to paycheck. So what's that going to look like? So that's why you see we brought out the monthly payment as an example to help them figure out, okay, this is how much I need to pay after my down payment. So the next example I want to talk to you about. So the first one that we talked about is building for stressful situations. Now, second thing, when we actually get into ideating and building, we have to think about, okay, so under what circumstances are the users using the product? A very powerful example from this comes from Jobs to be Done framework, which, by the way, is one of my favorite frameworks to think about. Think about what job is the person trying to do and what really is the social and emotional dimensions of it. So a good example of that was mentioned in this framework was of this product called Reese's. By Hershey's. So there was a time when the sales were not doing well, and they tried to find out when is the customer actually eating Reese's, and they found out it's actually when they're commuting, they're driving their own car, or they were in a public transport. So the offerings that were present at that time uh, were something that didn't really work for the customer. So they were so the offering was either a large size Reese or individual wrapped mini Reese's. For the large size, the issue was it was too messy to eat it in while they were commuting. Versus for the individually wrapped one, there were other issues, like, for example, it created litter. It required effort to open it while commuting. And thirdly, the number of wrappers that were out there, they thought, oh my God, did I eat that much? And sort of caused guilt in them. So the solution that Reese's came out with was to have this unwrapped Reese's that really pushed their sales further. So now that we've covered a few tools on how you can build empathy, we've covered some examples of how you can actually utilize that in your own products for your users. As product managers, you also need to have empathy towards your own team. So empathy towards your own team is important because your goal as a PM is to make sure you're building a better team. And one of the ways you can do that, if you have empathy, is you can give and receive feedback very effectively. One of the ways that I personally feel like I'm able to build empathy towards my team, especially the engineers who are working on my product, is I actually attend their retrospective sessions. Like if they're following Agile or Scrum, we tend to have team retrospectives, and just like a silent observer, I join the group and I try to understand what are their challenges, like what works well for them versus what doesn't work well for them. So the retrospective can be a very powerful tool for building empathy towards your team. Second one that is very important for us to understand is product manager is a curator of ideas. We don't really, I don't think we can come up with the best ideas ourselves. We need to make sure we are able to curate that from everyone. And to do the best way to do that is to listen. You have to listen a lot and understand somebody else's point of view. And then thirdly, as a product manager, you're working a lot with your stakeholders. You need to make sure you can get them aligned and get them to do stuff for you. A lot of these are negotiations, and negotiations are actually fueled by emotions, not by logic. And to be able to have successful negotiations, you need to deal with them with empathy. Like when you go to this session, like let's say you're trying to get on the OKR of some other team, you need to think about, or you need to ask, what are their goals, what is it that they are trying to achieve, and then you need to think back and see how you or your team can help them achieve their goals. Okay, so the next empathy I want to talk about is just empathy towards ourselves or yourself. In today's world, we I think it's become we are very hard on ourselves. Like this, when I joined Google as an example, I was going through this thing called imposter syndrome, thinking I'm not good enough, thinking that I'm not at the right place. There's always this voice going at the back of your head. So you need to be really mindful of that and ignore that and not really act on that. Let the thoughts pass through, and just breathe. So I think it's very important. We tend to be overcritical of ourselves, and we need to avoid that. Okay, now that we've talked about different types of empathy, something to think about is what could be some common pitfalls. I said that user research helps build empathy, but it's important to understand that research is not the same as empathy. You need to frame your research in a way that helps you build empathy, in the sense like you have to make sure you're capturing the user's emotions when you're talking to them. You're actually being able to feel what they're feeling. Otherwise, it's just research. When Of course, when you're doing product discovery, qualitative insights, it's great. But when you're actually trying to release the features, when you're trying to push stuff to production, don't just do it on qualitative insights. The power, combine the qualitative insights with quantitative insights. The power of two can be, the combination of two can be very powerful. The third thing is empathy versus sympathy. And they're not the same thing. Sympathy is like, okay, I see what you're going through, but empathy is I understand what you're going through. I feel what you're going through. So there are differences between the two, and something to watch out for. At the end of all this, I'm going to leave you with this thought. It's important now, more than ever, to build our products with empathy. More and more users are using tech products today. They're using it to connect with other people. It's all happening online. They are shopping online. They are observing or gathering all the information online. So if you do not understand the human impact of that, their emotional and social impact of what they're doing, you may not build something that's effective long term, or you may build something that you didn't really intend to do. That's why it's really important to bring empathy in today's product development. There's no reason to have that gif in there. I just added it because I thought it was very cute and it would put a smile on your face. I've put in some resources that could be useful, a template for customer journey, as well as Brené Brown's video that I mentioned. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or Twitter. Love meeting new people. And I'd like to thank you so much for your time and attention today.